All right. So where we left off, we just set up our custom brush in Photoshop. We are, of course, doing assignment 7, which we can shortcut to under assignments. And remember, when we shortcut on the assignments page, we'll also see the helpful, materials that can help us understand the theory behind these art forms, like my exhaustive explanation digital painting, or examples of digital painters from past presentations that I think are helpful. Remember that digital painting is not with clean line art. Clean line art is used for digital coloring. Digital painting is a lot more experimental with the shapes and the pixels themselves. Things will change shape, change color, change detail as you build. So you're just building with layers. Other things I have here. If you're interested, though I know we're doing animals and portraits for this as the option, if you're interested in how this relates to scenery, right, and concepts for landscapes, because we've only done concepts through photo compositing, right? But this is an artist that does it entirely through digital painting. And it gets used on these versions of movie posters, right? So that's always interesting. And so digital painting can be used for a lot more than just painting animals or people. And what's the last one we have here? And then what a digital honors student called the pain of digital painting, right? Goes through the things we're talking about in class, sketching. They call the shape painting color blocking, which is another term for it. At 100%, really controlling your brush settings, right? Very important. So this is just nice review from a student's perspective. And then how to choose colors. So remember to hold down Option and use images that you've loaded into Photoshop as reference to steal colors directly from that. That's a good way to get palettes. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It should represent what you want. This is a different kind of painting than I've been demonstrating. This is a much softer blending, but that's something we can do in the refinement phase. All right, and then optional stickers. Oh, just like we did with our spot illustrations, when we're done with this digital painting, they're just pixels. You can turn that into t-shirts, you can turn it into stickers, you can add offsets like they're showing here with layer styles. And so it's good to maximize their versatility, right, and their utility through understanding how to build the layers and use them. So when we look at the assignment, I've added to the bottom of the directions what is on the whiteboard here. This is what I want you to understand about digital painting. Though it can be incredibly experimental how you do it, as long as you build up from the bottom, right, and work with opaque pixels first, and then build with lower and lower opacities as you build, just like glazing and oil painting, or more transparent layers in watercolor. What you can do with these layers is entirely up to you. So far I've demonstrated, a background blank white that we lock and don't touch, then base layer that could be sketched first or not, could just be built with shapes, but the base layer should fill in the entire shape of your painting subject with 100% colored pixels. So 100% means opacity. Not only are we covering all of it, but we're covering all of it without any transparency, right? So you can also think of that as color blocking. We're on this step now in the demo of the custom brush layer. We built our custom brush. Now we're using that to get full coverage at around 70% opacity. And once we have that, then we get to zoom in and do details and work at lower opacities, different brushes to get the finishing effect we want. So all I have posted so far is just my photo reference and my inspiration. So I need to go to my folder to see how it all finishes up. So I go to my master folder, open up assignments, wrong folder, master folder, open up assignment 7, and I find my PSD file. My PSD file has everything in it that I need, but the problem with it, if there is a problem, it's that I have limited screen space, right? And my hero reference is quite small, even though a lot of these repeat my hero reference. So this is a tip when you're in this custom brush phase that we're in right now, right? My tip is to open up one or two of your references just in preview in an outside program that will just always be open to you. Now, I think I actually want this one. This is the one I composited out of different AI. It's tough because I kind of want both. So maybe I'll put both up. Now, because it's in preview, as I mess around with Photoshop, these won't change. I just need to Command minus, kind of shrink them a little bit because I'm going to fit them on the side of the screen here. And just like getting set up to do traditional painting, you spend a little bit of time, setting up your easel, taping the things to it that are useful to you, the references, making sure you have your brushes and your palette ready. And so I'm doing that with my desktop space. Digital painters who do it a lot might use multiple monitors for this kind of thing. They'll look at their reference on a tablet or an iPad, while they're painting on their laptop or their desktop. So there's no right or wrong way, but this is a helpful way to be able to see your reference. Just like if I were painting on my drafting table, I'd put my reference, off to the right because I'm right-handed. The next thing we need, of course, is the tablet and the all-important stylus, right? And the reason we all need to use it really for every aspect of this painting is because digital painting is based on our own pixels. We are not compositing them, we are making them. We are able to do the thing we are not allowed to do in compositing, which was make our own pixels. So the most basic kind of base layer is just something like this. Think of it as a primer layer. I did a large series back in my 20s of sticker paintings. And the sticker paintings were all little paintings done on adhesive vinyl. And just like regular stickers, they were cut to the shape of the thing I wanted to paint. Problem was, you can buy adhesive vinyl, but paint doesn't stick to it, right? So the first thing I had to do for those paintings was I had to figure out what the shape was I wanted to paint, right? I had to cut that out of the adhesive vinyl, and then I had to spray gesso it. I had to put a primer layer, just like if you were painting on wood or on canvas, so that paint would stick to that surface, right? So this is kind of like a primer layer, where I'm filling it with 100% pixels. Now, you don't have to do it all with one color. I like to do it with shape painting, like I did here and I demonstrated, just with a basic brush. And I make that brush 70% smooth, or rather 70% hard, which means it's 30% soft at the edge, and 100% opaque. And it's kind of like spray painting, right? It gives very, very even coverage, but slightly soft at the edges. Notice there's no blending of the colors. You're just filling in full shapes. The other approach is to sketch. So you can also sketch, right? And kind of the combination of those gave me this. So that is my base layer. Then we built our own brush. And the video, the last video in our playlist goes over how to do that. So that's a good thing to review. Once you have that brush, you will find it in your brush options at the very bottom. So the one I created was this one. And then the brush you create is what's called a profile. It's like the fingerprint of the brush. But in order to be able to use it in the way you want, you have to not just select the brush from the options, you have to manage its brush settings, which you'll find under Window and Brush Settings. It's also just in the sidebar here. And the ones that are most important are shape dynamics. I want to jitter the size of the brush, right? That's the load of paint that's in the brush. I don't have to put it back on a palette all the time, right? Instead, I get to say whether I want it to stay perfectly consistent, like a technical pen, or if I want it to have a varied kind of output like a real brush would. I want to control the shape of the brush, not through the tip, but whether it's what's called a, what are they called? For pinstriping. Whether it's like a load brush for like stenciling, or whether it's a tapered brush like for pinstriping. I want it to be a tapered brush so that the harder I press, the bigger it gets. The lighter I press, the thinner. So I want the control to be based on pin pressure. The whole reason we use the tablet for this. And then most importantly, I am not going to tape the brush to my fingers so it's always at the exact same angle. I am going to allow myself to twirl the brush and change the angle of attack, and that is under angle jitter. And you see how that changes the brush profile quite a bit. And then I want my brush to be more absorbent, so I play up the roundness, which makes it denser at the core and drier at the tips. And then lastly, I go to texture, and I use the light water texture from the built-in options, and I'm going to take its depth way down so that a little bit of that comes through, and that will help with the blending. Okay, now with those brush settings, my brush is ready to go. Now, I'm on the custom brush layer. This is all about making a more interesting paint surface. And so to do that, not only do we use this new brush, and we use it at a size of around, I'll say 300, 200, like that, but we don't want it to be 100% opaque anymore. Even though when it is 100% opaque, you see how it breaks up at the edges and it blends, but we also want it to be a little thinned out, so I'm going to do it at 70% opacity. And that way, it's going to blend with those other colors. All right. So I am going to stay completely zoomed out, Command 0, fit it all on screen. And then I'm going to use Option to steal colors. And then I'm going to be looking at my reference and trying to get full coverage with this custom brush. So I'm looking first at the shadows and the midtones and the highlights. And I'm just going to put some of those in, playing with these different colors. The more colors I use, the more that I can take from in the future. All right, Max, question. I can come look. Yeah, you'll always see the options up here. So you also want the flow to always be at 100%.
Yeah, everything was fine.
And they are now? Okay. It probably because you had an area selected. You didn't know you had an active selection. All right. So like we talked about last class, this really is the most basic digital technique we learn all semester, because we mostly just use this tool. Because I'm right-handed, I have my left hand hovering over the Option key. Whenever I want to change a color, I click Option and click on the color I want. And then my right hand is just with my tablet. That's why it's important to use both hands and just be kind of locked in. And when you're just doing this custom brush layer, don't try to get too detailed. That's why we don't zoom in yet. You want to think in terms of 3 different values. You want to think of your darkest shadows and make sure those are really represented. So I have that in the legs, in this little crease here, a little bit under the chin. And then we have the midtones, like on the back of mine, which is going to be more these reds, the greens, all these middle tone colors, which means they would be like a 50% gray if they didn't have color. And then we have the highlights.